I am Ben Grove. I'm the Managing Director and founder of EstatesDirect.com. We are a fixed fee 21st century estate agent.
In the early days, how did you analyse the financial needs for Estates Direct?
It's very difficult to forecast something that doesn't exist. So the sort of original 6 months or so, I'd say, was essentially a gentleman's agreement between myself and one of my original investors, who was Darren Richards from Match.com. And he basically said, if you go out and prove that it works and give me something that is scalable, then I will invest to help you make it something that's special. Over the course of 6 months, sleeping in the office and all sorts of weird and wonderful things, we proved that in Worcester, as our core territory, our pilot territory, that people were willing to pay online. And then that's where the adventure began, because it wasn't really about marketing then. It was more about, can we build technology that brings more efficiency to the estate agency system? Because when you do go to sort of raise money to grow nationally, you've got to A, prove you've got a pilot model that works, B, have a great team, because people invest in the team, not necessarily the business, and then also technology that brings more efficiency, so that you can actually operate at a much lower rate than the average traditional estate agent. So really the first hurdle to get over was to prove that people were willing to invest into the business model, full stop. And it was only at that point that Darren then invested in the business.
Okay. So timing was critical for you?
Oh, gotcha. Yeah. I mean, when you imagine, 6.5 years ago, really no one knew what online estate agency was. In fact, if anything, it was more of a myth. It was like the best kept secret that estate agency had. And the reason Darren worked very well for me is because when Dating Direct first launched, before it was bought by Match.com, everyone thought that dating online was this horrible, seedy, dangerous place, basically. And in essence, that's a little bit like online estate agency, because the traditional high street agents wanted people to think, oh, it's cheap, it's nasty, you don't get the same service, all this kind of stuff. When the reality is actually you get exactly the same service, you just don't pay as much money for it. So it's been an interesting adventure.
What sources of finance were available to you, and how did you know which ones to select or reject?
There's all sorts. You have friends and family that believe in what you believe in, that want to essentially invest. You've got obviously the banks, you've got VC groups, angel funds, startup funds, peer-to-peer lending. It's really just establishing what lending platform works best for you. I was very fortunate that I had a very high level investor that gave me credibility, I suppose, because he was obviously very successful in his own right with a startup company. So a lot of other investors would think, well, if there is a person that has already been successful and that person's investing in something else, then potentially the risk is diminished. But for me, the ability to actually put myself in front of what I'll refer to as my dragons, I suppose. Steve Smith from Poundland, Roger Danks from Blue Square Assets, Adam Piggott from CHK Mountford, etc., to be sort of locked in a room with 5 dragons and pitch to them and have them really believe in the model. But when we talk about investment, it's not necessarily just about finance. It's actually about what the investors bring to the table operationally. Are they willing to invest their own time, their own contacts? What can they actually bring that's not just finance? Because you can go and raise finance anywhere, I suppose, but you have to give away equity for it. But the equity becomes a lot more valuable if you've got someone like Steve Smith from Poundland behind you saying, I believe in this business, and I'm going to introduce you to these landlords, etc., And then on the complete flip side of it, you've got things like Kickstarter and Crowdcube, where you're not dealing with large-scale investors, you're dealing with people like us, investing £10. But if you get 1 million people invest £10 each, then you obviously have a lot of money to play with. The important thing is, as long as your business plan is honest and conservative, and you can deliver on the targets that you've set, you keep your shareholders happy, which is very important.
Do you think, as a new business, your approach to budgeting has been different, perhaps other businesses?
But yeah, I mean, I wouldn't say different to other businesses, but I mean, it's just a matter of literally every penny counts.
Yeah.
Because once that money is gone, there is no magical pot of money that comes to rescue you. You know, it's a case of once that's gone, that's it. And with startups, you know, you have that constant fear that drives you forward, but there's also that fear that if you don't do what you say you're going to do and that pot runs dry, A, the business could not exist. B, you could dilute your own shares, which makes the business less valuable personally for all the hard work you put into it. And C, it can cause, it's life-changing. You know, you sort of have a relationship. We're very lucky here that the staff that work here are like one big family, you know, and I have that constant pressure to make sure that they're looked after, because if it all fails, then they lose their jobs.
Yeah.
And that's my responsibility. So it's, you know, it's a big thing. And if you're a mature business, for example, you have that bankroll. You know, you have a certain amount of confidence that you are going to earn X amount of money on every month based on historical performance. So we don't really, well, in the early days, we didn't really have that, whereas now we do, which is a little bit more security for us.
How have you had to make the financial case to other people? And this probably taps into what you were talking
a lot of detail
about earlier as well. But yeah, how have you?
Yeah, it's
to sell your idea.
It's an awful lot of detail. I mean, it's one thing standing up in front of a group of people and sort of injecting the passion that you have for the business. I mean, that's probably 80% of the decision. Is, you know, do I believe in the person that's running the business, or do I believe in the team? But really, when it comes down to cold, hard due diligence, and they are ripping your model to pieces, essentially, you've just got to make sure your numbers stack up and you stand by your forecasts. Yeah. I mean, even now, you know, I'm constantly looking at the figures to find, you know, where we can save money or where we can make ourselves more efficient. It's not something that you just sort of sign off and forget about. It's something you constantly work with, so that whenever you forecast forward, you know that you should be well in the clear. But yeah, especially when you've got, you know, the shareholders that I have, you know, it's very much a case of profit is where it's at, and if you've got no profit, it's pointless. So
how do you evaluate your financial performance?
I think it's quite simply just revenue. You know, is the money that we're spending on marketing providing us with a return on investment? You know, is it bringing our cost per acquisition down? You know, when you consider this time 5 years ago, bidding on simple things like AdWords on Google, online estate agent was £6, I think it was, per click. It's now £36 per click, because you've got people with lots more money investing in these terms. So it's about being very smart and just constantly being associated with the marketplace and understanding where the benefits can add value to the business. And that doesn't ever really stop. It's just something you're constantly trying to improve. And I'm just very lucky that I've got shareholders and management teams that we've built up that trust with each other. So we share information and then try and make decisions based on experience, I suppose.
So that must be difficult, trying to measure the relationship between what you've spent on marketing and return on investment.
No, not really. Not really, no. I mean, it's different now. I mean, if you look at sort of back in the day when it was, let's think about before internet. You know, you've got newspaper advertising. You know, newspaper advertising, if you were trying to sell me a newspaper page, you base it on the amount of copies that you've sold. But ironically, they then say, well, actually, for every copy sold, we believe that 2.5 people will read that newspaper. So let's just say, for example, they sell 100,000 newspapers and they'll tell you that 250,000 people have actually read it. That's not really what we'd call traceable. That's just fabricating figures based on data to say, well, that's what we believe is the case. Whereas with online marketing, you can trace it to the penny. You know, you have Google Analytics, you can do goals, you can track conversions, you can see where people hit your website, you can see how much they spend, you can see how long they spend on the site. So you just constantly have that very sort of real-time overview of where your money's being spent and what that results in on the other end. It's only really when you get down to, if we do newspaper advertising, for example, we rely on our staff to ask the question, how did you hear about us? And you rely on the customer actually telling you honestly where they saw you. I think unfortunately it's really easier for the customer to say, oh, I just saw your website. for example, not, oh, I saw you in the Gloucester Echo
Yeah.
in the property section kind of thing. But within a reasonable fraction of doubt, you can figure out what works for you and what doesn't.
Yeah. So you mentioned Google Analytics and some other tools. Are there any particular tools that you would recommend to other entrepreneurs who want to evaluate them?
Yeah, I mean, Google Analytics is fantastic because you can hardwire it into your website. It's very bespoke. As long as you've got a team of people that know what they're doing,
Yeah.
You can track pretty much everything backwards from someone paying to where they entered the site and where they came from.
Yeah.
And then you can make decisions on how your website works, how it looks, how it feels, where certain buttons are, so you know that you are making the most of the people hitting your site. But really, if you're going to invest in tech or buy tech off the shelf, you've just got to make sure that what it's reporting to you is important to the business. So your key performance indicators, your KPIs. So we know how many leads come into the business and how many of those leads then convert into valuations and how many percentage of those valuations turn into instructions and what the average order value is. And if that starts to get lower, then we know we've got to inject more money into marketing. So it's just a constant understanding of the data that the company has.
Yeah, and have you ever had any experiences where your analysis of the financial figures or the marketing expenditure has made you rethink something or invest more money in one area and less money in another?
Yeah, absolutely. I suppose if you look at Rightmove, for example, okay, so Rightmove is a subscription-based model, okay, so they used to have a rule because obviously I used to work for Zoopla, so I know roughly what they tried to do. So if you can imagine, they used to base their subscription on an agency branch.
Right.
Now, if you've got 10 branches, obviously it costs quite a lot of money. The interesting thing about online agencies, we only have one branch, which is our headquarters, but we've got properties all over the country. So eventually the portals figured out, well, hang on a second, these guys have got 5-10 times the amount of property that this guy in the high street's got, but we're only charging this guy one subscription fee and the other guy we're charging 10 because he's got 10 branches. So they changed the way their financial model works for online estate agents. So now they have a geographical pricing model, which meant that essentially our marketing costs were increased tenfold.
Yeah.
So we had to then think, okay, so all these nice products that we're investing into Rightmove, actually, we've got to pull all those now because we just simply can't afford to do it anymore. It doesn't make financial sense, so that we can at least continue to list on these portals. And then as time's progressed, we've now, rather than including certain products as part of Estates Direct's platform, we charge an additional amount of money for Rightmove premium listings, for example. So the great thing about premium products is that Rightmove advertise on their website that a premium listing is worth £250 recommended resale value. Because we buy so many of them, we get a really good quantity discount. So we sell them for £70. So we actually are able to say to our clients, well, look, we can give you this product, it's worth £250, we're selling it for 70, but each one of those that we sell then brings our subscription fee down. So it's really things like that you have to tweak and evolve just to make sure that you're staying one step ahead of any changes that the business might have to go through. Does that all make sense?
It does, yeah. So just being much more selective about the products that you're offering and where you're offering them.
Yeah, absolutely.
And making decisions to sometimes retract them if it's costing more than it's bringing in.
Yeah.
How critical do you think your constant analysis of this financial data has been to your overall success?
Oh, without question, the most important thing. Well, one of. Staff are the most important, but yeah. Without finance, investment-based businesses don't work. You need very patient investors that are willing to, see the long ride out, if you see what I mean. Because the big win for online estate agency is that eventually the whole marketplace will change. And we don't think that's probably going to happen till 2017, 2018, something like that. So really, from start to finish, this will have been an 8-year investment, which is fine, on the grand scale of things. But you'll find that in the UK, we're quite impatient as investors, whereas in the US, you have investors that are very patient and invest in the long game. Hence, the people behind Amazon, for example, they were making huge losses until they eventually became the global success story that they are now. But yeah, without the constant scrutiny of figures and making sure performance is in tune with the amount of money you have available at any given point, the business just wouldn't be successful, full stop.